Jon Moskal, Quicksilver Systems. Welcome
Yes,
to the
sir.
podcast. How
Now,
you doing?
thanks. Appreciate it, Nick. Good.
We're going to spend this episode talking about Insurtech. We will be talking about Quicksilver, but John's got a pretty lengthy background, has seen a lot of Insurtech. Similar to me, John, we've been dealing with Insurtech before that was a word, and when we were still debating whether there should be an E in Insurtech or not. So
Yeah.
you have a lengthy background and have seen a lot. So we're going to go into that. And I start all of these off, John, by giving the guest an opportunity to do an elevator pitch. Jon Moskal, who are you? Why are you here?
I'm good. Why am I here? Hopefully to educate some people and have fun. So
Let's do that.
that's gonna that's gonna be the context. Yeah. So I've been in the industry over 30 years. I actually kind of fell into the PNC through a premium finance company that I was working for. It's actually an insurance company, and they had an arm for premium finance. And that was back in 1990. Boy, I'm dating myself now. Back in 1990, and just really fell in love with insurance at that point. And at that time, that was really the beginning of technology, believe it or not. I wouldn't call it Insurtech back then, but this certainly came later. But the ability to provide customers, you, me, and other people that have premiums, even as low as $1,200, $700 sometimes, and I can't pay it. I don't have the money, but I can finance it. I can give you $50 down, and then I can pay the difference over 6 months, even at 70% APR or whatever that crazy number is. But I can do that, and that's really how my industry experience started, and really from there evolved into all the different areas that I've covered within insurance. I consider myself probably a specialist in the insurance process. So everything from onboarding agents all the way out to literally stamping or licking a stamp on an envelope and putting on the back of a USPS truck. So I've covered the entire spectrum across the board. I've done the physical assortment of policies. I mean, I've done it all. So
Claims
enjoy
claims as well.
claims, not as much, but yes. Yeah, I don't have as extensive experience on claims. It was really always more around the underwriting side, the rating side, and then of course the entire back office. But the back office has a lot to do with claims as well, because when you're taking a
Mhm.
first notice of loss, right, you got to process it and make sure everything happens the way it should happen. I probably have more exposure in claims through One Inc that I just recently worked for on the payment side because it's so convoluted. It's a mess. So probably more experience on the claim side from that than I do actually in my previous experiences with companies.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Insure. I think folks that don't know insurance very well, or innocent bystanders, let's call them that, innocent bystanders, um, don't recognize the complexity of it. So like you were talking about the complexity of premium finance, but even a first notice of loss,
Mhm.
complex. Underwriting, doing non-sequential endorsements, complex. I remember seeing a software developer try to get his brain around non-sequential, right? And being able to handle stuff like that. And so from an outsider's perspective, it doesn't seem complex, but from an insider's perspective, it is extremely complex. And you would have thought, John, that technology would have solved so many of these problems, but I see two particular issues. One is the technology keeps changing, right,
Right.
which creates its own little thing. Um, but in some ways, I almost feel like technology has made the problem worse because we've taken a complex, ugly workflow-ish type of thing, and now we've scaled it because we have technology, so we can scale a whole bunch of stuff. So we've made the pain points more painful and not exactly solve them. I'd like to get your perspective on technology specifically as it fits with insurance, because am I wrong?
No, I think actually it's funny you're saying this is a conversation I had probably 25 years ago, actually, when it all started. I think the challenge, and again, I mean, property casualty insurance, any really of the insurance marketplace today and I don't understand why, but it could be age, it could be whatever. But the problem I think today is that it's just they're not keeping up with the times. They don't understand the value of a customer experience, and they can't. The problem is they can't resonate and put their heads around, okay, if I'm receiving my gas bill, do I like the fact that I receive my gas bill on my phone? I get a text and says, "Hey, your bill's due in 5 days. You want to pay it?" Capital Y, capital N. Yes or no? It comes due. It's due today. You want to pay your bill? Yes or no? 5 days late, you're going to get a late fee. Do you want to pay your bill? It's simple. That's not rocket science to figure out how that works. Within the insurance space, it is. I mean, it literally takes rocket science to figure out how that works. And I think it is due to the complexity. But I think to your point, Nick, is insurance technology has always kind of wrapped its head around creating solutions, whatever that might be. I mean, again, back in the day, it could be premium finance, it could be a claim, it could be whatever it is, but creating solutions for those areas. But I think the challenge is what's the actual process? Not every company has exactly the same process. Therefore, does a solution company A fit the
Mhm.
same way for company B, company C, company D? Probably not. And I think that's one of the things that I'm learning certainly with Sean and others now is, there's a lot of different hooks in these different pieces. Does it mean that we have to pull the engine out of a car and put a new engine in? Or does it mean that the trunk isn't working? Let's fix the latch on the trunk and let's get that working while everything else is working the way it needs to be working.
Yeah.
Does it make
I
sense?
think it completely. I think it's so complex that I think the challenge that firms like yours have is CTOs or CIOs of some of these insurance companies, because they're so busy in the whirlwind that they deal with every single day, they perhaps have not kept up with some of the technological advances that have occurred. And so it is, to me, I think it's challenging for them to sort out, never mind the folks within the organization that don't know technology, to
Right.
sort out our workflow is different. Will this work for us? And I think it becomes a challenge for companies like yours. Like, you can't possibly handle every single workflow, that every single nuance. So
Right.
you're building to a general workflow, and then hopefully having the technology flexible enough to be able to handle the edge
Sure.
cases, and things like that. And I almost see like that as being one of the defining problems that exists in Insurtech today, in insurance today, is the inability. I've seen it firsthand, the inability to evaluate, the inability to know, like, will this technology work for us? How do we vet it out? How do we make decisions around it? And John, one particular use case was one where I was the lead to test it out. And, you know, trying to figure out if, hey, this thing doesn't exactly fit our workflow. Is that a problem with our workflow, or is that a problem with
Exactly.
software?
Exactly.
In that
Right.
particular case, it was actually a problem with our workflow, right?
Right.
And if we did not fix the workflow, that would be that we were introducing inefficiencies into the system, and it was the vendor that kind of guided us towards amending the workflow. And I think, to me, it seems like that's one of the biggest challenges firms like yours have, is not that you don't produce great technology. You do. It's the buyers don't understand it well enough, and so they're paralyzed, I think. What do you how do you see that?
Yeah, I think fear plays a lot in this. In a couple of opportunities that I've had, where our technology was the right solution, the fear is, well, okay, kind of take a step back here. First of
Mhm.
all, I think a CIO, any CX, doesn't matter what their title is. I think they're always threatened by the loss of a job. I mean, hey, we all know if you make a bad decision and it financially impairs a company, you better go find somewhere else to work, right? And making a decision for millions of dollars with respects to these systems, that's a big deal. And you don't make a bad decision on one of these things and go, "Oops, sorry, yeah, I kind of messed up our financials for the year. Do apologize for that." I mean, that's not the way it goes. So I think there's a lot of pressure on the C environment or even the SVP environment from an IT perspective to make sure that they are getting it right. You and I both know, I know based on where we are kind of within our model here, IBM was never a bad choice. Didn't matter if it worked or not, it was never a bad choice. It was never a bad decision. As they used to say, nobody gets fired if you choose IBM. Well, today, IBM doesn't exist, but there are other companies like IBM that exist within the Insurtech space. So the same thing applies. You choose a Guidewire, you choose some company that has that credibility behind it. Hey, Mr. CIO, you're not going to get fired for making that decision. Wasn't a good choice, but you're not going to get fired for it. And I think what happens is that prevents the opportunity to really look at a process, as we've been talking about, is where is where is the process? What does it look like? Walk me through it. The challenge is the people that can do that are not the ones that are typically invited into these meetings.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to meet with you who's actually physically managing the policies on a daily basis. You're too low in the totem pole. It's going to be somebody like two levels above you that you know who they are, but you don't really report to them. But they're the one that's over that
Yeah.
area. And they're going to say, hey, this is the way it is. But you would say, no, it's not. It's not that way at all. Out of sequence endorsement's a good example. No, that's not the way it works. It doesn't, so it's almost reminds me jokingly of a company that they buy a CRM system for their sales force, right? But they do it without salespeople involved. And I always laugh. I'm like, how do you know what you need, what we need? Like, how do you know that's gonna be the right tool? Well, because management says it will. And I'm like, okay, that had absolutely nothing to do with the
Mm-mm.
guys that are in the field using this every day. And the same thing applies on the insurtech space. If I have a rating tool that isn't smart enough to know that I write in 15 states, but when I pull up the line of coverage or line of business, it's going to go ahead and pull 50 states up. It doesn't know that we're only writing in 15. Well, guess what? I'm going to write in 50 because I get more money that way. I mean, it just doesn't make sense that you wouldn't understand that process and what's important to a company. And I think to your point, you're making a really good one is you have to be a consultant first. You got to take the pressure off yourself and say, I need to understand and learn what it is this company's doing. And to your point too, when we first started, if they're doing it right, fantastic. There's nothing there for me. Why would I want to waste their time and my time trying to find something that doesn't exist? But if there is something in their process that's not right, then give me the opportunity, Mr. President, whatever, to walk through your process and see where the holes are. Maybe where we can do is we can help validate a solution for those particular areas of your business.
That's been my experience is the engagement is faulty, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
because there has to be learning on both sides. Like there's no possible way that you can go into an organization that you're meeting for the first time, second time, third time, and absolutely understand their workflow, who's involved,
Right.
where things fall down. Like it takes work on your part and it takes work on their part. And I think a lot of one of the prime issues is that we underserve that engagement, that it's not long enough or it's not intense enough or intimate enough for the firms to know each other. And then your example is exactly because this is exactly the way it always falls out in my opinion. They don't do the vetting and the due diligence correctly. Then
Right.
the clock starts ticking. And now everyone's starting to feel some pressure, like we got to make a decision.
Right.
And for me, I think the two decisions that they made is they make what's the safest decision. So that's no one's ever gotten fired for buying
Right.
IBM, the
Right.
safe decision, or the
Right.
cheapest decision. And I would
Right.
say that in both cases, I always end up hearing complaints afterwards, like we spent 8 figures and it didn't change a thing, or we went
Right.
with the cheapest option and it definitively did not work for us. It did not, the things they promised did not occur. So how put your let's pick Jon Moskal up and put you as CTO, CIO at some carrier. Let's call it a Florida domestic, since right now we're both in Florida. We're gonna be hanging out. We're gonna be hanging out tomorrow. But
I
since
know that would be
since we're
really
both in
fun.
Florida, we'll call it a Florida domestic, right?
There you go.
So
Yep.
you're leading this effort. How would you guide the process?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess from that perspective, I want to understand. Well, there's several different areas. I almost would want to whiteboard it, if you will.
Yeah, of course.
You know, what do we have today? What works and what doesn't work, and why? Okay, so let's figure that out first. Hey, like I went through the process. Hey, everything is good, but the rating is wrong. Okay, well, why is it wrong? Well, because the system we have, yada yada yada, right? Whatever. So we chalk that up to okay. So it's is it truly a system issue or it is an internal issue? I mean that's going to be important too.
Well,
So I would
you're
go.
I hate to interrupt you, but
Oh yeah,
like you
sure.
said what you said why twice, and to me it's like we don't ask why enough, right?
Right,
Like you must see this because I've dealt with um some of your competitors as well, and I've had this conversation so many different times, and it's like they walk in and it's like, well, this is broken,
right,
fix it, right? And but nobody asks why, like, and it
right.
gets back to, is it an internal why? Because if it's an internal why, the new solution's probably not going to fix it either.
Exactly,
It's something on your
exactly.
end.
That's right. Yeah, I mean you've got always had to validate what the issue is. And again, it could very easily be that the why is this particular part-time employee that you have working doesn't understand this part of the process, yet they're significant to getting that particular job done. It's almost like if you took an employee that does the manual sorting of policies, right? So they've got all these shelves above them and they pull this one, this, all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, it's like how difficult is that? It is difficult if the wrong documents are not in order. I mean, if the wrong documents are in order in a way that doesn't make that policy actual effective. So that's huge because then you've got an issue that goes way beyond that particular employee. But again, that's a process. And if you don't understand the why is that part of the process broken, it doesn't matter what technology you throw at it, it may not work. So
Yeah.
you've got to figure that one out.
Yeah. At Insurance Nerds, we've been featuring some articles from Joe D'Souza from Pro Navigators talking about knowledge management about this particular thing. Like, how many processes do you have where there's a person doing it and it's not documented?
Right,
What happens if that person leaves the company?
right,
Right? Like how is that supposed to get done now? Right? And so like this seems to be a very endemic issue in the insurance ecosystem. There's so much stuff that's John, there's so much stuff that's being done. We don't know why it's being done. It's being done now because we did it before, but no one knows why it got started in the way that it is. And so it just becomes legacy that just drifts along. So I can picture you guys sitting with a team. Let's say everybody that's there that needs to be there is there, and they
right.
start talking about how the radar is broken. You gave that example. The radar is broken,
Sure,
right?
sure. Yep.
What's broken about it? Why is it broken? Right? Like what exactly is happening? And so I see that lack of engagement. Like how often do you get in front of prospects where they have not you don't think they have allocated enough time or investment up front to be able to resolve this? Like they almost want like a quick fix. How often do you bump into that?
Not as often as I used to anymore. But again, I think the difference is I'm also going to the top. So,
Mhm.
I don't get as much of that. But obviously, if you go into the lower part of the organization, you're going to get that a lot. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. But I think it's more and more again when I'm talking to the president, I'm talking to the C-suite, depending on what kind of company it is. I mean, certainly on a $100 million company, you can get there. that I don't see as much of that as I have in the past, but in the past, a lot.
Yeah, that's then the question is, you get to the top, do they have the other people in the
Right. Well,
meeting
exactly. That's right. That's right. Exactly. And you
it's
know that fairly quickly. It's kind of interesting that you brought that up because you think about like any company, doesn't matter what, any company, you got the president of the company, you can tell when you meet that person what that organization is going to look like without ever meeting anybody else in the company. You can just tell there's a demeanor about them, there's this engagement about them, there's this unselfish, desire to help the company about them versus just the opposite of that. You know that if you walk through that organization, everybody would have their, heads down, hoodies up, and like they just, that boss is coming through, there's no engagement at all.
like,
Exactly.
let
Yeah,
me get you
exactly,
going. Okay,
right? Like head
let me
down.
program.
Yeah. I mean, so I think from that perspective, I think for me personally, and I don't know why, maybe it's because I'm a psych major or whatever, but I've always been really good at reading people and having an opportunity to really understand kind of where people are coming from. And you mentioned something about earlier about, I was in my mind, I'm thinking about one of the companies I'm talking to right now. With one of our competitors, they have a manual. It's literally, I mean, I laughed when I saw it. She held it up for me. I mean,
Physical manual.
yes, it's a physical manual, and it's their process of how they're doing insurance from point A to point B, but they're using a system, and their company that they're using right now requires them to have that in order to use their system. And I just went, oh my gosh. I go, I said, I can't even imagine what that would be like. And they were like, yeah, we're not even going to have that conversation. And it's just funny because it's like, okay, so there is a process, but somebody hasn't been astute or smart enough to know how you take this big, huge manual and, and create an opportunity to put it into a system where you don't have to flip through page to page, entering information into a system.
Mm,
The system does it for you, but it needs to understand the trigger points. Like I said, 15 states, commercial auto, you know, when I put in commercial auto, it better give me 15 states and not 30 states or 50 states or 5 states or whatever it is that, it wants to give me. It's got to give me the states that are in the system so I can do that quote properly.
Geez, it reminds me when I first got in, and we had to quote homeowners, like we'd have to go into the company manual and like
Yes.
walk through this section and then this section, then get a debit this thing, give a credit over
God, I
here,
remember all
this
that. Oh my
number.
God.
Like it, and when I first got in, I remember doing it and thinking, why has nobody computerized this? Like this does not seem efficient at all. And we had to, we've had to kick the industry dry, kicking and screaming
I
to
know.
pull
Well,
up
now
pull
and now
into this.
now a couple of technology companies are taking that to the next step with AI, which is great. But you got to validate, you can't just say, here's what I want. Oh, boom. Now I've got 15 companies that are going to offer that, because now people go back into it and they're like, oh, wait, 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 wait. Why did it pull this up? Why did it pull that up? So again, I mean, you gotta know what is in there and what's needed to make it work right.
Okay, so clean slate. Okay,
Yes.
you're a company is recognizing like, hey, you know we're still using technology that we used 2 decades ago. It is adequate, but we're finding that from a competitive standpoint, we're losing opportunities here. It's just
Sure.
too slow, too
Right.
whatever. Okay, so
Right.
we've got to start making some changes. They call Jon Moskal of Quicksilver Systems, and you come and you put your, Bruins consulting cap on, right? Maybe your hoodie, okay? And you need to have an honest conversation with them about
Right.
expectations. So, John,
Right.
let's set expectations. If I think I know the answer to part of the answer to this because I know a transition and an implementation of a new system, man, complex, right?
Yes.
Fraught,
Yes.
fraught with problems. I mean, you at the beginning of our conversation, you talked about like, 7-figure mistake. But
Yeah.
if you get this wrong, it's more than a seven-figure
Oh,
mistake because
absolutely. Right.
you know, that's how much you paid for the potentially for the licensing, but now you screwed
Right.
up so many other things. It's a bigger problem. So let's set expectations. How should a company be thinking time-wise on allocation of resources to lay the foundation, lay the groundwork on what works, what doesn't work, why, workflows, so on and so forth, just so they can get to a decision. Let's talk about just so they can get to making an
Yeah.
appropriate
No,
decision.
that's
And then
sure.
secondly, we'll talk about implementation.
Okay. I mean, you're saying if I'm an insurance company, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a good model for an insurance company would be give it a year. So when you're starting to see that you've got issues, when you're starting, because the reason a year is a good period of time is because you know that your block of business or your book of business rather is going to be renewing, hopefully, and you'll be putting new business on. So what you're looking for is when can we put a new system on? When can we make a decision that's going to make it easier for us to bring new business on is really ultimately what you're asking and what you're looking for. So I think a company needs to start investigating within the year of when they think they need to make a decision. And again, I'm saying that from my perspective of when companies are talking to me. Now there are some bluebirds that happen. Hey, 3 months from now, we need to have a system or whatever. But typically what happens is in January, they've had their board meeting, they've had their internal meetings, whatever it is, and they've identified either what isn't working or they've been chaperoned, if you will, through these different trade shows, right? And they've seen some really cool things. And now their techies are coming back to the office and chatting it
I want
up. And,
that. I want that.
yeah, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I love it. Oh, you got to see this,
yeah.
whatever. So that's when kind of the wave begins, and that's when the company itself needs to start. I mean, the groundwork is okay, why did you like this? Oh, because they do this. Oh, because they do that. Oh, because they do this. Oh, because they do that. Well, the thing that a company needs, and this is again, it's a drawback for many companies, but it's an asset for those that do it right, is okay, why are these things even important? And then what they'll do is they'll go out into the field and say, what complaints are we getting currently with the way we're doing business? Oh, our customer portal's terrible. Our agent portal's terrible. Agents are always complaining about us because it takes too long to get a quote, and they've got an insured that's sitting next to their desk, and whatever it is, right? All these different areas within their business. They'll identify some of these key areas. And that's when it's like, okay, I'm getting the majority of the comments coming back in this particular area, which is a good area to start. The other flip side of that, though, is there is that pressure from other companies. So you're a CEO, I'm a CEO, we're having drinks or whatever, and we're chatting it up. And you're like, hey, have you seen Guywire's new system? And you're like, no, I haven't. You need to take a look at it. What do you guys use today? And we use, whatever X system. You need to take a look, man. It's like the best, right? So all of a sudden that seed goes in your head and that's what you're thinking about. Doesn't mean they're going to be a good fit for you. You may be a $25 million company and you couldn't afford the first zero in their system, but that's the buzz, right? And so I think that's in essence how this whole process starts. It either starts with the real pain, interest, people coming back to the company, or a high level cocktail hour that, there's a lot of kind of, hey, my car's bigger than your car thing and whatever. I mean, all those kind of comments. So, but
So
I think that's really where it starts. In the same time, I mean, we're mentioning a complexity. This is really complex because that's just the insurance company side, right? And I've only brought up two areas of the insurance company. You've got other people in that company, underwriters, whatnot, that are also going to trade shows, right? So they're saying, hey, I'm having a hard time getting a quote out. I'm having a hard time, managing this particular policy for whatever reasons that they are. And hey, this person said that they're using this and it's become really easy and they're saving X amount of time. I'm in a situation right now where all of that's happening. And then I'm the rep and I've got to sell something, so I got to identify where the opportunity is and then start making my pitch to get in there and get a sale out of it. So there's all those different things that are happening at the Same time. I mean, they really are. And what becomes important to the company, the insurance company, is what is your plan? What are you trying to really solve?
Yeah. But brass tacks, right? It is a complex decision, right? So if
It
if
is.
if they're not allocate like the 3 month thing just makes me shiver trying to
Mm-hmm.
think about how to make that decision that quickly. Um,
Yep.
but that seems reasonable to me. Like a year does seem reasonable. Like you should be able to get a team together, allocate resources and time, and do due diligence to
Right.
come to a decision. So a year seems reasonable. I think less than that, it's risky, right? Like you may come under the gun to make a decision before you feel comfortable being able to do that. So I want to transition from decision to now the rubber hits the road, implementation,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And so many things can go wrong
Oh,
in
absolutely.
implementation.
Yep.
Is there best practice like as you were discussing certain things? I'm thinking like, do we want to run the systems in parallel? Because you I don't know, do you want to pull the plug and then push the plug in on another one? That seems risky. Probably want the systems to run in parallel a little bit just so there can be some double checking, but you may have to bring on more resources because now you got two systems you have to kind of
Right.
carry forward. In your experience over the past 20 years, implementation, art, science, best practice, how you've probably seen a cross section of failed and really good implementation.
Yes.
What's your opinion?
So the first step is always data. That becomes the real critical issue. What's the data look like? I always say data, what do I say? Crap data in, crap data out. I mean, so you've got two different options to your point, and that is that we call it the big bang. So I want my system out and I want the new system in, and I want it done by December 31st of this year. That's a big, big ask, but that's what we want to do. Okay, great. Well, if the data that I have currently with the policies that I have and all the transactions that are taking place, if there's garbage in it, then when I'm importing it into the new system, the same garbage is going in. I haven't really done anything with the garbage. So what I have found 90+% of the time is it's better to roll a book out, because what happens is as you're rolling the old business off and you're putting the new business on, you're making sure that the right information is going into the system at the time that it needs to go into. You can scrub a book, really clean, but then you're talking about that's probably going to add maybe 6 months or more to the implementation process. And most companies don't want to wait until
Yeah.
March to get their system when they've already said by December 31st, we need to be writing our first policy.
Can I clarify what you just said,
Yeah,
just so
sure.
I understand it correctly and translate it for the audience? So a decision's been made. There's going to be an implementation.
Right.
And I think what I heard you say was, um, so pick a date, let's say December 31st. So on January 1, new policies are going to go into the new system, not the old system, correct?
What if the system is built correct? I mean,
Yes.
you're talking implementation. You're talking about I just bought, so it's December 31st. I just signed the contract and we're going to start implementation on the 15th of January, whatever that date might be. That implementation is development of the system, right? So no, it's going
Mhm.
to be what your goal is. You want to put all new business into the new system for sure, but you also want to roll the book.
Right.
So again, the system's
But
not going to be really developed until, let's say, I don't know, let's say you put your first policy on in June. That's 6 months, and that's probably realistic. So you put your first policy on in June of the new system. Well, any business that's rolling off is now going to go into the new system. And then every new piece of business from that point forward is going to go in the new system. And then every existing business as it rolls off is going to go into the system. So basically, what should happen is within a 12-month cycle, your old system should be no longer used unless you're using it for other reasons.
Okay. So let me rehash this as well, because
Yep.
I've only heard nightmares. I've never actually been a part of anything like this. So I want to make sure that the audience and myself understands the implications of the implementation. Say that 5 times fast.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so you made a decision. December 31st is the date. It's going to go January 15th is when the switch goes on. So a policy, let's say it's homeowners, policy that's renewing on January 16th is going into the new system,
Correct.
correct?
Now, again, you've got kind of a year window in between what you started and where you are right now, because the implementation is the building of that system, right? It's not like on January 15th, I'm going to deliver you a system. January 15th, I'm beginning to build what it is that you want. Now, invariably, it could be I've already got 99% of it built. It's a cloud system. All I'm asking you to do is change a logo and do this kind of stuff, and it's done. That's great. That's not typically how it works. So what's going to happen is, however your current system is set up and however you're doing business today, that's pretty close to what you're going to be moving into. But the new system, as we've been talking about pretty much this entire time, is the new system is going to take the right process. So instead of A going to C, A is going to go to B first, then B is going to go to C. So it's going to, your entire implementation is building of that system. But with respects to once the system, let's just make it really simple. You in Florida is a good example of that, right? Let's talk about homeowners. You have a homeowners policy, your new carrier, you just bought John's system, and the carrier says we want to start implementation the 15th of January. Great. What does that mean? That means now we've got to start building the system. So design and all the other stuff that goes into it. Let's just say it takes me 90 days to build that system. So March, let's just say April 1st, the system is built, it's ready to go. So what's happening with the policies are all the new business that I've received once that system is built is going to go
Mm-hmm.
into the system. All the business that's rolling off, so all of my I guess April, so all of my April, my G, well, it'd probably be more May, but a month forward. So May, June, July, August, all the way to the end of the year. All of those policies are going to be renewed in the new system. I'm not going to do anything with them in the old system. They're going to go
Okay,
into the
got
new
it.
system.
Got
But
it.
the data from the old system has to live in the new system, or at least has to have communication with the new system. That's where the significant challenges exist. And that's why people blow up and go, I can't do this implementation. I don't ever want to go through this
Okay.
again.
Okay. So let's stay on that scab. Okay.
Yeah,
Let's pick at it a little bit.
sure.
So what would you recommend? Like why do things go off the rails? How might things not go off the rails? What would you recommend around um resources, timing, philosophy of how they should be thinking of this? Because the story you just said is what I hear all the time.
Yeah.
The the implementation is taking 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, or it's not work like just horror stories, right? There's got to be a better way. So I'm wondering, like, from your expertise, how do you think about the way, like, put yourself as CEO or CIO? What would you do now that you've seen this a bunch of times? What would you do on your end, right, to
So
make sure like this implementation goes smoothly?
yeah, it's funny you brought that up. And there was a gentleman I worked for. He was actually CIO for some really big companies, but he became president of a company I worked for. And actually, I was involved in probably more implementations at that time than I ever was, pretty much anywhere else in my career. And I remember he had logic. It was really neat because they were always successful. It was always based on, he called it turn the dials. So
Turn the
he would show
dials.
a diagram. It was really, really simple. He would show a diagram with different dials, and the dials would mean different things. It would be time, it would be, whatever's needed to make this implementation work. So all the dials are lined up exactly the same. They're all north and south, every single one of them. Well, all of a sudden during that implementation, it's like, oh, we want to add a box to the screen. Okay, that's exactly right. Okay, more time, time goes up. How do you want to adjust the other dials? Because everybody's got to move. They got to be in sync. Right now, they're out of sync. Do you want, so you want to give up more resources? Okay, now resources starts going up because you got to draw more. So what the whole idea was, I need to have my implementation of my system up running by December 31st, 2024. And I'm starting the process now. The implementation is beginning, but I need to know how to be successful in making sure that this system is working and running by the end of the year. That's my goal. That's my objective. If any one of these dials turns, I have to know what resources that I need to pick from and choose from in order to get those dials back. Because if you're saying I want to add it, oh, we want to add this to the screen. Okay, what are you going to give me back? Right? I mean, it's like a really simple model to think of is you have $100 and that's your money. You have $100 cash. It's in an envelope. You've got that for the week. And you're like, oh, okay, my groceries are going to be this, my whatever it is, all your different expenses, right? They're all different envelopes. And you say, oh man, I really want to go out for dinner tonight. Okay, great. What do you think that's going to cost? $50. Okay. I'm going to take $50 out of your envelope, out of whatever you tell me where I'm taking the money from. Because
Yeah.
it's got to come from somebody. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist on its own. It's not like a virtual amount of money, right? The same thing applies in implementation. You've got to know as you're developing, as you're going through this implementation, you've got to be astute enough to say, hey, employees, hey, team, I appreciate your suggestions. I appreciate your input. At the end of the day, though, here is what we need to accomplish. So instead of asking them what you want, which is what every salesperson in the world does for good reason, my question is, what do you need? What is most important to get your product up and running when you want it to go? Now, after the needs on January 1st of 25, sure, let's put a general ledger. Sure, let's throw this. Sure, let's do this. Sure, that whatever. Those are additional dollars that will be allocated at that time. But today, you said you want to have this thing deliverable and running by this date. What do you need to make that happen? We know what we need on our end, but what do you need on yours? And
Yeah.
that's the word that should be used, not want.
Um, do you find that over time it gets easier to push back? A
Um,
young salesperson's that's a difficult conversation.
oh
That's
gosh, yeah.
a
Yeah, you got a manager on your back going, if you don't sell this, your quotas, you're out. Yeah. But what's really interesting, and I meant to bring this up way earlier in our conversation tonight. We kind of almost touched on it, but didn't, and that is this industry, unfortunately, I think, due to what we just talked about, the pressures of sales organizations, right? I mean, everybody, if you're a public company, you've got that pressure. If you're private, you still got pressure. I think what happens is it takes away from the value of a relationship. People buy from other people because they like that person, not because they have to buy from them. If you have to do something, you're not going to do it, or you're going to be really not a happy
Mhm.
customer in doing so, right? Well, you want insurance companies to be happy with whatever solution, doesn't matter what it is, but whatever you're selling them. But you got to have a relationship to make that happen. I've got to know why, Mr. CEO, this is so important to you. Well, we missed our revenue number. This is the second year, and I'm getting a lot of heat from our board. Okay,
Mhm.
let's take a look at that and see where that kind of falls down into. Oh, you're not getting your month end reports for 90 days late. You're not doing this. You're not doing this. You're not. Okay, now we've stemmed the problem. Can we provide a solution to that particular area? Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Do it as a standalone? I don't know. If we can't, where else do we need to plug and fill to make that work effectively? But that's where you got to start.
Yeah. Another area that I think is challenging is quality control. I've not seen implementations of like policy management systems, but I've seen implementations of analytical tools. And man, the scant amount of quality control that goes into it. It's like a quick, yeah, it looks good, and it
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
goes off, and then something falls through the cracks, right? And
Right.
and becomes a big problem. And if something's not falling through the cracks, it's falling out of your ears, and I'll try to create a blooper reel around that. But quality control,
I
it's because John, quality control requires a unique personality, in my honest opinion, and it's
yeah,
generally the same people who are doing like the vetting, the due diligence, part of the implementation. They're also doing the quality control. It's like they get too many hands involved, and quality
yeah,
control has to be almost vicious. Has to be almost like, no, it didn't match. It didn't work.
right,
Right? Like
right,
something's
right,
wrong. But
right.
I don't usually see that. So what do you advise when it comes to quality control?
It's so funny because I think of it even in the cyber world today, right? I think the attitude that quality control should have is we want to break it. Let's try to break this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Because
exactly.
if you break it, good. Where did it break? How did that happen? What did we do? Now you can go back and step in time. If you don't know that and something happens, you're dead. I mean, it's like, where'd it happen? I don't know. Okay, has it happened before? I don't know. It's like, oh my gosh, how do you not know this? This is what you do, right? So yeah, I think the goal for quality control area should be, can we break what it is that have created? So what is it that we're trying to accomplish? Can we break that? If we can break it, then we know that there's an area there that needs to be fixed, that needs to be strengthened. And the other thing too from quality control is that's why, us and I'm sure other companies, that's the reason that you put a test environment out, because you're asking your customer, and the people that don't do this are really, I think it's wrong. You should ask your customer to break the system. I mean, they're the ones that are paying for it. Can you break what I just created? And if you can, now we as a technology company should have the ability to be able to map back to where did that occur. That's where the quality of the data comes in. If I have it's not a snapshot, but if I have the view of every single transaction that occurs, and now I'm asking you as my customer, break this, go out and do a quote and break it for me. And you do. I should be able to know where that transaction occurred and where that weakness is in the system, and then be able to go back and fix it.
If you can't, so for most insurance companies, I would classify their primary customer to be the agent or broker that
Yes,
they're
exactly.
that they're selling through.
Sure.
As you're saying that, I'm like, if you can't find an agent or a broker who's willing to help you try to break it,
Yeah,
I think you have a
right.
bigger. I think you have a bigger problem. Like you clearly do not have strong enough relationships in
Absolutely.
in your distribution. Like that would be a red flag to me if you
It's
couldn't find something to break it. But I think that's a really good philosophy to have the cyber world. Like, please hack in, find the portal hole to that you're able to get in, and then we'll close that down. Then find the next one. Like,
right.
let's close them all down. That seems like a really
You know,
marvelous philosophy to have.
Nick, you're bringing up a really good point. And actually, I'm this is exactly where I am tonight. So I'm working with a prospect. They're wanting to make a decision, and I know why they want to go the direction they do. I told them it's a bad decision, so we inserted ourselves. Fortunately, when we were at the trade conference, we inserted ourselves, so at least we got a little bit of a hiccup in there to kind of make them take a pause. But one of the things that I did it. I was actually talking to one of their underwriters in the company last night, same as you and I are talking about right now. And I said to her, I said, what do your agents feel about the decision that you guys are going to make? And she goes, I don't know. And I said, I said, so let me ask you this. I said, can I get one of your agents to see our system? Can we set that up where we can walk them through it? If they don't like it, then please don't buy it. It's the last thing I want you to do. But if they like it and it meets their expectations, now you've got a buy-in for the rest of the company that you've got and all of your customers out there. And so she turned around. I guess there was one in the office. She turns around and she goes, "Hey, Debbie, come here a minute. I want you to listen to this." So Debbie slides over and we're having this conversation just like we are right now. And I said to her, and she goes, and she goes, "Yeah." She goes, "No, I know we've already heard she's talking to the carrier. "I know we've heard you're already going this direction." And I said to Debbie, I said, "Debbie, but you're the agent. You're the one that's selling the policy, right?" And she goes, "Yes." And I said, "What if the direction that they're going is really bad?" I said, "Have you seen it?" "No." "Well, then, so you don't know anything about it." "Well, they said it's going to be better than we have today, and we really need better." And I said, "But you haven't seen it." I said, "Wouldn't you rather see it and know what's coming than not see it? And now you're more frustrated than you are today." And she just started cracking up and she goes, "Well, is there any way else for us to see what you have?" And I said, "Well, that's up to your pal here." I said, "She's your insurance company contact. She's got to make this happen." So, but that's my perspective. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, I, I just think this last question speaks volumes of the industry because it's my experience as well. Even having been on the carrier side, like it's the lack of recognition of getting customer feedback. I just think there's a
Right.
misunderstanding about it, but I think that it's a really good way of kind of framing it all out. And I think a good way to end the conversation is to go into like one last friction point that I think has caused so many problems over the years, which is the technology is changing so rapidly, right?
Yes.
So you
Right.
have folks at these firms, it's like, hey, wait a second. We had a mainframe, and then you told us to switch to a server, and then you
Right.
told us to,
Go the
big
cloud.
data was coming, switch to the cloud, and then you told us to do this other thing. And it's just like, how do I know like 4 years from now there's, AI and quantum computer, and we're not going to have to like reinvest 8 figures to do this exercise again? There's no guarantee in
There
life.
is
Like
no, there
the
isn't.
technology is evolving so rapidly.
Right.
But if you could give guidance on like how should they be thinking of this, I think I know your answer. I think it really boils down to the company needs to know itself and its own workflow and understand
Right.
it. And then like the technology is a tool, not always the solution. But when you're speaking to someone that's just like, yeah, yeah, I've heard that this cloud thing. That's just we'll be back to servers again, or quantum computer is going to like disrupt this thing. What do you say? How do you counsel them?
Well, I mean, I just to your point, I mean, you know, the industry is in the same situation as the rest of the world. The rest of the world outside the PNC industry has evolved. They have seen things change. They are making things. I mean, and I'll usually throw some, examples out, Chase for banks or whatever it might be, different examples of where those companies look, they have the same question. I'm a customer. Wells Fargo is my bank. I have the same question. How do I know that at some point in time I'm still going to be able to withdraw money? I don't know. I mean, I'm really worried about that. And it's the technology is going to evolve. I think what's more important than am I making the right decision on the technology is am I making the right decision with my technology partner? Because I know my partner company is going to keep me in the loop, is going to be evolving. That's why I'm putting my trust in this
Mm,
relationship. I know they're evolving. I understand the past where they've come from. They introduced me to the new people that are coming on board. I've met their staff. We've gone out and drinks or whatever it might be. You're being pulled into. It's not the technology, it's the company, because the technology will always be there. It just may evolve to look a lot different in 10 years than it is today, and I'm sure of it. But if you're comfortable with the company that backs and supports that technology, and you see a history of success, no matter if it was a different company, but you see the history of success with the individuals that are running that company, I mean, to me, that's the most important thing.
Yeah. And I think this is a great way to end the episode because I think a big lesson and something I've been preaching for a while is like you can't just sell your solution.
Right,
You have to bring wisdom to the table because if you're just selling a solution, then you're a commodity, right? But
right,
if you're selling insights and you're a partner with them in that decision making part, then you're much more valued. And I see way too many insurtechs just overly focused on the tech stack and the technological solution. And I'm just
right.
like, that's not the problem you're solving. You're solving a deeper problem. You're monetizing it with software, but that's not your solution. Your solution's bigger and deeper than that. It has to be, or else it'll be just transactional for you.
Well, and I think you're making a really good point. Is certainly is a good ending, and that is being involved in this industry. It takes a lot of time and it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of moving pieces.
Mhm.
Just like the forum and other things. But I think if you're helping educate the industry by posting on LinkedIn, by thinking outside of the company, you're thinking in the industry.
Yep.
What is it that we know? What are the challenges? And then allowing other people to communicate back with you on, well, I don't believe that, or hey, you're absolutely dead on. I mean, I absolutely agree with you. And I think that's what this is all about. Again, the technology is built because we know that there is a need for it based on what people are saying that's not working right, or even the things that work right, but there's too many steps. I don't want to take 5 steps to do this. I want to take one step. Oh, really? If I push this button on my computer, it's going to do all that? Oh, please save me the other 30 seconds of my day. You know,
Yeah, marvelous, John. Thank you. This was like a
Sure.
quick MBA on to
Yeah.
me on business development and insurtech. So really appreciate your insights, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Yes. Looking forward to it. Very exciting.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John.
Okay. Welcome, Nick. Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.